So hello and welcome to this masterclass about the Panama Papers, or the big breach you've no doubt seen in the press. I'm not going to be talking about the detail of the breach. What I want to try and communicate are some of the things that you can do within your organisation just to make sure that they're looking after your client data nice and safely. And also, if you're sharing your client data with other businesses, what sort of questions you can ask to gain some assurance that they're looking after data in the right way. My name's Ken Munro. I'm an ethical hacker and security consultant. I hope you find this useful. What I want to give you are some of the questions that you can ask. And the first one I want to think about is, how would you detect a breach like this? Now, the Panama breach involved over 2 terabytes of data. That is an enormous quantity of data. It's, I believe, the largest data leak in terms of size ever. Now, that amount of data you can't get out easily. That's noticeable. That's going to flag up on radars. But it won't be seen if your organisation is not looking for it. And a really simple thing to do is have a chat with the people in your organisation, those in IT, those in security, and just ask them, well, let's just say that data is leaving our business. Are we in a position to spot a spike like that? Because that's a lot of data. And maybe it's being drip-fed. Well, even so, there's still a lot of data moving out. Would your business be in a position whereby it could spot that data leaking out of the business? We call that exfiltration. And that's when you're using covert channels to make data go out over places you wouldn't think, like maybe being sent out through your DNS lookups. That's when you're looking at web addresses on the internet. Or even simple things like your ping. When you ping a server, you can use that to hide data. So ask your people in your business, are they in a position to spot large volumes of data leaving the organisation? So it's one thing detecting some data going out of the business. It's another thing altogether deciding what to do about it. Let's say someone in one of your teams monitoring some of your systems noticed something going. Are they empowered to shout and will people actually listen to them? And will someone go, actually, yeah, we need to look at this. We need to do something now. And let's just say you've got a Panama-sized breach going on. And the conclusion, the way to mitigate it is to shut down all of your systems, to stop the business operating. Is there someone of sufficient seniority who understands the potential for this? They can go, do you know what? Actually, let's cut ourselves off the internet. It's going to be business limiting, but nothing like so bad as even more customer data leaking out of the business. And that's what you need to prepare for. Make sure the people in your organisation can go, yep, we're prepared for this. We're ready. We know what to do. We know how to do it. We know how to get a person of sufficient seniority out of bed at 3 in the morning and how to get them to respond. So that we go, do you know what? Actually, we've got to close down our website. We've got to close down our everything to the internet. Because if you're not ready, it's going to happen when you least need it. In your organisation, how do you share sensitive customer data? That stuff that's the lifeblood of your business. How do you exchange it with your colleagues? Do you email it? How do your customers send it to you? Do they email it? How do you store it? In your deleted items, maybe? Well, email's great, but email between businesses is pretty commonly not encrypted. So if you're asking your customers, your clients, your users to email you data, that information could easily be going across the internet completely unencrypted. Think about how you share it internally. Do you email it around? Well, that's great, but let's say the hacker manages to compromise your email system, which isn't that difficult, frankly, using things like phishing attacks. Once they've got access to your mailbox, have a look at your sent items, there's your client data. Fantastic, I've got everything I need, says the hacker, and now off to publish. And your business is going to be in pretty bad shape as a result. Now, a much better way is not to email the data itself. Email references to the data. So have a separate repository where you keep all your customer data that's encrypted, that's safe, that has another layer of authentication to it. And so the information you share is not actually the sensitive data anymore. It's discussions around the data, references to it, but not the material itself. The next point I want to make is about you sharing data with other organisations. And I want you to be a bit of a policeman, the person who's actually thinking about what information you're passing out to third-party organisations. What are you doing? What are you sharing with them? And use that process to assess whether, do you know what, they're actually a safe place to share data. So ask some questions. And one of the first ones I look at is, well, how are they asking for my data? So they want some of my sensitive information, whether it's some client data I'm working on, and they want my info. What process do I have to go through to share it with them? Do I have to upload it to a nice secure portal? Or do I send it through on plain text email? Think really carefully about that, because if it's not going onto a nice, safe, secure place that I get a password to and a one-time code SMS to me on my phone, there's a fair chance they're not applying security controls as well to the rest of their business. They clearly don't understand how sensitive that client information is. Do you want to be another Panama? Do you want to be sat there going, yes, that's some of my customer data in the public domain that I share with a third party, and did I really go through a due diligence process of making sure they were secure? Another great way for understanding whether a third party is looking after your data safely is to look for evidence of international security standards. And a great one is ISO 27001. It's a really good security standard that most organizations should be able to follow. They can get accredited for it. And that is a great badge that says, do you know what, we look after security. We look after data properly. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it does show that the organization is taking security seriously, that they've got processes that they follow, going, that data, that's sensitive. We need to look after that. We're going to look after that in this particular way, and we're going to make sure it stays safe. So ask questions about the organization that you're giving your data to see how they deal with it. And ISO 27001 is a really good place to start. There are lots of other accreditations around, but I'd ask the question about 27001. Are you 27001 accredited? If not, I'd want to know a lot more about their security controls. The other thing to be aware of is that it's possible to accredit subsections of a business. So it might be, we've seen this in the past, an organization has accredited the security processes of its staff canteen. Now, I'm being silly at this point, but it's perfectly possible to do that and not actually accredit the part of the business that deals with customer data. So ask the question, probe a little bit deeper, and make sure you're sharing your data with an organization that looks after it safely. Now, how about the way that you deal with data? Let's say you're working on some client files. Let's say you need to work on them at home over the weekend. I'll copy them off onto a USB key, laptop's not working, and I'll install them onto a home computer and I'll work on them there. Well, that's great, but the problem with home computers is they're not usually subject to the same security controls as your work computers. Haven't got the same quality of passwords, haven't got the same quality of updates, the antivirus isn't as good, and you're putting your customer data into a system that's really not under the control of your organization. You need to be really, really careful about that. I know it's tempting, we've all got jobs to do, we've all got time pressures we need to deal with, but that data is a goldmine for the hacker. So I know it can be more difficult, but think really carefully. You've got a laptop, probably provided by the business. It's probably got an encrypted hard disk. It's probably got a strong password to it. It's got the latest system updates. It's got the latest, greatest antivirus. There's a reason for that. It's a much safer place to work. Think carefully about printing stuff off. I know it's much easier to mark things up when they're printed out, but so much easier to lose. So think about your working practices. Are you going to be the one that's actually the security backstop, the one who says, do you know what, actually I do need to be really careful about my client data? Or are you going to be the one that forgets your laptop case that's got some printed data in there, that's got a USB key without encryption on it, forgotten in a taxi, had a few beers on Friday night, and all of a sudden you're the source of the data breach? A point I'd also like to raise is that of insurance. Now, on the back of the Panama breach, I'm sure there are going to be a huge number of claims. Can you imagine how much information was shared secretively under non-disclosure? And the potential implications of that breach are huge. So somebody's insurer somewhere is going to be picking up a very big tab at some point. Now, what I'd like you to do is go and speak to your risk manager if you have one, typically the person who deals with insurance in your organization, and just check. Check that your organization has sufficient insurance cover. You might also want to look to make sure it's got cyber liability insurance cover, because sometimes hacking events are only covered under a cyber liability insurance policy. And if you're providing your data to a third party, I'd also really encourage you to go and make sure they've got sufficient and appropriate insurance, not just a PII policy, but also make sure they've got the right insurance cover for the type of breach that we're starting to see in the market now, data breaches by third-party hackers. Now, the last one is a very familiar subject, that of passwords. Now, have a little think. When you locked yourself out of your work computer last, you probably rang the help desk and they reset your password for you. And it was at a difficult time and you had a hard time getting it done, and they asked you for information you didn't have and you couldn't remember your reset questions, and it was all a bit sticky, and maybe they gave you a temporary password. Well, you've just worked around the system. So you're expecting your help desk to work and bend the rules in your favour. Now, there are some fantastically clever social engineers, we call them. Hackers have got the ability to talk on the phone and convince people to do things they wouldn't normally do. So if you're prepared to beat up your help desk and let them bend the rules for you because you're having a bit of a bad day and can't remember what your first school was or what colour your first car was, that's an opportunity for the hacker. And the hacker's going to try and exploit that and use that to try and get your password reset to something they can use. So just think carefully. I know it might be painful going through that process, but if you can walk your way through the process by being a bit shouty, by explaining how difficult your day's been, blah, 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 the hacker, the social engineer, can do the same. So I hope you find the advice useful. Please go and ask some questions and get yourself comfortable that your organisation isn't going to be the victim of a breach like the Panama incident.